Nice. Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to our ceremony that we have today that gives us an opportunity to be recognized. Several of our officers was in the Fresno Police Department. One of them, who's no longer a police officer with us, who has since gone on to retire, but we still want to recognize him. And really, this gives us a great opportunity to not only recognize our officers and talk about their heroic efforts, but to allow you, part of the family and friends, to be able to hear about those heroic efforts as well. At this time, what I'd like to do as we begin each and every one of our ceremonies is to have our chaplain, Rod Lowry, come up, and he will do the invocation, and then that will be, we'll ask you to remain standing after that, and then to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll do some introduction of dignitaries at that point. So if you would all please stand for invocation. Rod?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here as we celebrate our people and the work that they do. If you would, join me in prayer, especially a time probably like any other. Our officers need your support. We need the support of your prayers. So if you would, Father, we count it a blessing that, one, we can come to you and know that you have an attentive ear, that you are listening, that you're well pleased with our expression, reaching out to you and asking that you would keep our officers safe, that you would begin to change the culture that's turning against what's right and grasping a hold of those things that are not good. Father, we just ask that you would encourage our citizens, our community, to embrace our officers, to help them understand that so much good work is being done, but goes unnoticed. And only the few, the minority, the negative things come to light. So we just ask that your Spirit would increase, continue to bless and keep our agency safe, help us to enjoy a day where we get to set time aside and to honor those that have gone above the call. Lord, we just thank you, and we ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, now if you'll direct your attention to the flag and join me in reciting Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Chief.
Thank you, Rod, very, very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce some dignitaries that are with us today, beginning with my boss, City Manager Bruce Rudd, who will be coming up in a few moments to say a few words. Bruce, thank you for being here. We have a couple of council members, and I don't know that there's any others that did make it, but I wanted to introduce Paul Capriolio, council member. Always at our ceremonies, and Esmeralda Soria, a new council member as of January. And we have a former city clerk, Becky Klisch, who's with us. Thank you, Becky, for being here. We appreciate that. And I'm going to introduce a dignitary that he thought he could sneak in here, but our former sheriff, Richard Pierce, in the back. Please stand, Rich. Longtime friend. And I don't know that there's any other folks. If I did miss, put your hand up. Okay, forever hold your peace. Let me introduce members of my staff, and if I'll ask them to stand, and if you would, once I get done introducing them all, if you would then hold your applause until then. Deputy Chief Robert Navarez, please stand. Deputy Chief Patrick Farmer. Captain Randy Dobbins. Captain Dennis Bridges. Captain Mike Reed, Lieutenant Jose Garza, Captain Andy Hall, and I see in the back Lieutenant Mark Salazar, and Lieutenant Don Gross standing in the back here. And I believe that is it. Give them a round of applause, please. Thank you. Okay, at this time I would like to have our city manager, Bruce Rudd, please come forward for his comments. Bruce?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. This is a celebration in a lot of ways, and a recommitment to the men and women of the Fresno Police Department. We do live in a very interesting time in which, because of cell phones and other technologies, a lot of people now think that it's perfectly appropriate to do the would've, could've, should've, and do the Monday morning quarterback of what you guys have to face each and every day, in which there is no opportunity for well, what should I do here? Could I done this? I mean, the decision that these officers have to make are split second. And in a lot of ways, and then you'll hear about it today, they are saving lives. And what doesn't get reported is the individuals or families who have loved ones who are here today because of the quick and swift actions of the men and women of the Fresno Police Department. You're going to hear about actions taken by officers who are proactive in that they cut guns off the streets, or just as dangerous, a drunk driver off the street. And because of that, there are people who are here today in our community that may not have been if it wasn't for the actions taken by officers to get those guns off the street or get that drunk driver out behind the wheel of the car. So I am honored to be here today with both who I've already said publicly more than once, probably the best police chief any city could have, as well as a command staff that is just as committed to making sure that this community is safe, and that all of us have the luxury, and I call that the luxury, be able to sleep at night knowing that our families, our loved ones are safe. So Chief, thank you, and I personally want to thank you and the men and women of the Fresno Police Department for letting me sleep at night. So Chief.
Thank you very much. And I want to echo a few of the things. This is a few of the things that was said. The national climate that we exist in today in law enforcement is something that I've never experienced, and I've been in the Fresno Police Department 36 years, and August 1st will be 14 years as a police chief. I've never seen anything like we're facing across this nation today. Fortunately, in Fresno, we live in a different community where people are still pulling up next to our officers and giving them a thumbs up. And when our officers go into restaurants to eat, when they get an opportunity, or go in to have coffee, citizens are anonymously buying their meal or their coffee. We live in a very good community in Fresno, unlike some of the cities that we've seen across this nation with a lot of the civil unrest. And this is different. We've had civil unrest in our country for many, many years. I can think back when I was a young officer in 1980 when we had the Miami riots. 18 people were killed in the Miami riots. And that spilled over across this country and ultimately ended up causing a lot of problems even in our city at that time. And then in 1992, we had the Rodney King incident, where that incident, I believe, resulted in about 53 people being killed in civil unrest as a result of the riots that occurred in Los Angeles and across this nation. And at that time, we too had some civil unrest. But the difference between then and today is this thing called social media. Anytime an officer today is out there doing their job, whether it's making an arrest or any type of enforcement encounter that ultimately results in the use of force, rest assured there is someone nearby with a smartphone taking video of that officer. And when you think about the number of calls that we handle in law enforcement, for example, in the Fresno Police Department, we handle about 1,150 calls per day in our city, not including the number of traffic stops that our traffic officers and a number of other officers handle on a daily basis. And then when you look across departments across this state and across this nation, for example, there's 338 police departments in California, another 57, I believe, sheriff's departments in California. And you look at all of the contacts that they have on a daily basis and the number of calls. There's literally millions of calls that are handled across this country. Opportunities for officers to make mistakes that are caught on video. Yet we see a handful of videos played on YouTube that generate the bad name for law enforcement today. I hear people say today sometimes that not all cops are bad. I say, yeah, I'd rather you phrase that to say very few are. That'd be like saying not all kids are bad. Well, the truth is very few kids are bad. We have to change that mentality. It's becoming so difficult for us today to be able to recruit people into our law enforcement profession. And the reason is because of the negativity that's out there today. I've been meeting with our sergeants and our command staff in the police department, explaining to them the importance of countering the negative, both internally and externally, so that we can recruit the best candidates. Because right now, not everyone is willing to put their right hand up and say, I will serve in a police department or sheriff's department. And so we need folks in this community to help us to counter the negative. And today, we get to do some of that. We get to recognize some heroes. We're going to recognize individuals that have lifted latent prints in volume that ended up resulting in the identification of suspects that removed those individuals from the streets. Absent that physical evidence, we would not be able to do that. They would continue to victimize people in our community. We also have the opportunity to recognize those individuals that have gone above and beyond the call of duty in arresting drunk drivers, intoxicated drivers, removing them from our streets, individuals that are going to be receiving pins for 500 DUI arrests in our city. We're also going to be recognizing those people that have removed firearms from our streets. There's no shortage of firearms in the city of Fresno. We have some 20,000 gang members in Fresno. We remove about 6 or 7 firearms off of our streets every night. Officers that are encountering gang members, removing these guns without the use of any force, and certainly not deadly force. And we're also going to recognize those officers that have saved a life. People that have gone above and beyond the call of duty to put themselves in harm's way and minister to someone and administer first aid and to be able to save a life or rescue someone who is drowning. Those are the types of activities that we need to have conveyed publicly on a day in and day out basis. Unfortunately, we seldom hear about the life-saving efforts. We don't hear about the number of lives that are saved. In fact, I read an article today in the Police Executive Research Forum. They're calculating now how many people are being killed by law enforcement. 461 so far this year across the nation. But I didn't see anywhere in that article about the thousands of people that have had their lives saved as a result of a heroic effort on the part of a police officer. I never see how many lives have been saved by the removal of a drunk driver from our community. I never see how many lives have been saved because we've removed a firearm from a gang member. But today, we're going to talk about that, and I thank God we have members of our media here that are going to cover that and convey that good news publicly. So, thank you, number one, to the police officers that are here today for what you are about to be recognized for and what you do day in and day out in our city. I want to close with this, and I've said it many times. I believe our police officers have the most difficult and dangerous job there is in society today. They are expected to know the unknown, to see the unseen, and to make split-second decisions with limited facts, knowing full well that they're going to be second-guessed after the fact by those people that have all the facts. That is a very, very difficult job to do as a police officer. And I want to thank you guys for the incredible restraint that you use day in and day out in carrying out your duties in a professional manner. So thank you, folks, and thank you to the families that share your loved ones with us. We have a saying in law enforcement that although it is a police officer that wears the badge, it is the family that carries the weight of that badge. And that weight is oftentimes that burden of not knowing if your loved one is going to come home, of having that loved one working nights and weekends and holidays. Incredible profession, a noble profession. You guys are all God's ministers of justice, and I want to thank you for serving and allowing me to be your chief. Thank you. God bless you. At this time, I'm going to have Acting Lieutenant Rick Tucker. He is going to be reading some of the names, all of the names, but he's going to be reading the reasons why these individuals are being recognized, and he'll be calling up certain deputy chiefs to assist me with these medals as well as our city manager, Bruce Rudd. Rick?
Thank you, sir. We would like to start today by awarding the latent print suspect identification pin. Will Deputy Chief Pat Farmer please come forward and assist Chief Dyer in presenting these awards? Will Cadets Erica Regalado and Timothy Barnett please come forward? Just as the major commendations recognize heroic efforts and exceptional performance, the Latent Print Award recognizes our members for their hard work in lifting essential latent fingerprint evidence at crime scenes, which result in the identification of suspects. For calendar year 2014, the total number of latent print cases submitted by all personnel was 3,513. There were 5,465 latent prints entered into California's automated fingerprint identification system. Of these, 1,229 were identified and tied to suspects. This is an identification hit rate of approximately 22.5%. These numbers are significant because the more latent prints we collect at crime scenes, the more suspects we identify, arrest, and prosecute. Historically, every arrest from a latent print hit results in another 3 to 4 cases solved and additional suspects identified and apprehended. Both cadets Timothy Barnett and Erica Regalado lifted 6 prints within a 12-month period that resulted in the identification of suspects. For their success in these efforts, they will receive the department's bronze latent print pin. In addition, Cadet Regalado lifted an additional 6 prints, earning him the silver latent print award pin.
I just wanted to add that it's no longer Cadet Timothy Barnett, but it is actually Officer Tim Barnett. In fact, he graduated from the academy last Thursday, #1 in the class.
Next, we will recognize the officers that have earned the DUI Recognition Medal. Will Deputy Chief Robert Navarez please come forward to assist Chief in representing these awards? Will Officers Roland Rendon and Monty Lewis please come forward? Officer Gil Holguin is also the recipient of this award, but he is unable to be here today. The DUI Recognition Medal is awarded to Fresno police officers who arrest 500 or more DUI drivers during their career with the Fresno Police Department. The DUI Recognition Program was created in July of 2006 as a response to a sharp increase in DUI fatalities in our city and to recognize those officers who have dedicated their career to removing impaired drivers from our streets. Nationally, every 52 minutes on average, someone is killed in a drunken driving collision. In 2013, over 10,000 people were tragically killed, and every 90 seconds, someone is injured because of this preventable crime. Our city is not immune to these tragedies. Since 2005, 85 people have been killed and 1,059 have been injured in DUI collisions in our city. Though we will never truly know the number of lives that have been saved, we do know that the efforts of the men and women of the Fresno Police Department have reduced DUI fatalities in our city by an incredible 62%. The DUI Recognition Medal for 500 or more DUI arrests was designed after a special traffic safety recognition award received by the city of Fresno in 1963 from the President's Committee for Traffic Safety and displays the Green Cross for Safety. The Green Cross for Safety was worn to identify the very first traffic officers and has become a symbol of traffic safety. Officer Roland Rendon, Officer Gil Holguin, and Officer Monty Lewis are being recognized here today for their outstanding DUI enforcement efforts. Very few officers in the department will achieve this level of recognition in the area of DUI enforcement. This medal represents many long hours, nights, and weekends in making our streets safer, and their efforts cannot be understated. Besides these 3 officers being honored today, only 11 DUI medals have been awarded since this medal was created 9 years ago. We would like to congratulate these officers as they receive the Fresno Police Department's DUI Recognition Medal for 500 or more DUI arrests.
Let me add, our department, under the leadership of Captain Andy Hall, has been recognized twice as #1 in the nation, our department, for our efforts against drunk driving. And when you look back in 2002, before we expanded our traffic efforts and put Captain Hall in charge, we have 52 people killed in traffic collisions in our city. As of this morning, there were 15, and 6 months through the year. We've cut that fatalities in nearly half over that period of time every single year. And I think that number I heard was 62% reduction in DUI collisions in our city. That is something that is a credit to these folks, as well as Captain Hall, Acting Lieutenant Tucker. Thank you, guys.
All right, Deputy Chief Robert Navarez, you have you're going to assist in the Recovered Firearms Award pins, which we'll proceed with now. Will Sergeant Paul Cervantes, Officers Miguel Alvarez, Nathan Carr, Luis Carrillo, Eden Serta, David Finstermaker, Robert Fry, Brent Garcia, Henry Garcia, Jarrett Geringer, Justin Hardy, Corey Hastings, Felipe Lucero, Brian Pierce, Zeb Price, Manuel Romero, Anthony Valles, Mark Retrato, and Vincent Zavala, please come forward. This is only the 3rd year that we've awarded the Recovered Firearms Award. It was created in 2012 because of the previous year had proven to be very active for gang members and other criminals to illegally possess firearms. Through the efforts of patrol officers, the Violent Crime Impact teams, the Street Violence Section's Felony Assault and TAC teams, along with other investigative units, numerous firearms have been taken from the hands of these criminals. Without the continued efforts of all personnel to disarm these individuals, the citizens of Fresno would experience a record number of incidents of gun violence. We may never know the number of homicides that were prevented, including that of officers, through the proactive efforts of officers to keep our streets safe. Congratulations to the officers who make it very difficult for violent predators to carry or use a firearm within the city of Fresno. The following officers are being recognized for recovering 10 or more guns within a 1-year period. Magic Sergeant Paul Cervantes, receiving his 2nd pin. Street Violence Felony Assault Detective Miguel Alvarez. receiving his second and third pins. VSIT Officer Nathan Carr receiving his fourth pin. Street Violence Felony Assault Detective Luis Carrillo receiving his second pin. Magic Detective Eden Serta, first pin. Homicide Detective David Finstermaker, first pin. VSIT Officer Robert Fry receiving his second pin. VSIT Officer Brent Garcia, first pin. Magic Detective Henry Garcia receiving his fourth, fifth, and sixth pins. VSIT Officer Jarrett Geringer, first pin. VSIT Officer Justin Hardy receiving his second pin. VSIT Officer Corey Hastings receiving his second and third pins. Magic Detective Felipe Lucero receiving his second pin. Street Violence Felony Assault Detective Brian Pierce receiving his third and fourth pins. Magic Detective Zeb Price, first pin. Magic Detective Manuel Romero, first pin. VSIT Officer Anthony Valles receiving his 5th and 6th pins. VSIT Officer Mark Witrado, first pin. And CCAT Detective Vincent Zavala receiving his 4th pin. Detectives Ted Garcia, Tom Harden Jr., and Robert Yeager have also earned the Recovered Firearms Award, but unfortunately we're unable to be here today. Let's congratulate our award recipients as they take their seats.
There were some couple of folks, Brian Pierce, his dad, Sheriff Pierce. Brian, you're a far better cop than your dad was. And let's see, who else was there? Oh, yeah, Zavala, little Vince Zavala. His dad, Vince Zavala Sr., who worked for us for a lot of years. And it goes without saying you're a much better cop than your dad. So thank you.
We will now award the Fresno Police Department Life-Saving Medals. The Life-Saving Medal is awarded to members whose immediate actions result in the saving of a human life. Will Deputy Chief Pat Farmer please assist the Chief in presenting these medals? Will Officers Matthew Vincent and Michael Diaz please come forward? On the morning of October 4, 2013, the Fresno Police Department received an emergency call regarding a young mother waking up and finding her one-month-old baby not breathing. Officer Vincent arrived and found the infant blue with no signs of life. He immediately began infant CPR. Officer Diaz arrived and took over the chest compressions while Officer Vincent continued with rescue breathing. The officers were soon able to determine that the rescue breaths were being obstructed and the baby's chest was not rising. The baby's tongue was blocking the way of the officers getting a clear view of the baby's throat. Officer Diaz picked the infant up and rolled her face down into the palm of his hand. He administered 3 blows to the infant's back, at which time she began to faintly cry. The officers put the baby face up and continued chest compressions and rescue breaths. The air was still not being taken in fully, so Officer Diaz turned her over again and gave her 3 more back blows. The officers repeated the CPR and back blow process one more time, and the infant began to cry steadily. This life-saving activity was performed for approximately 5 minutes. When emergency medical personnel arrived, the baby had a good, strong pulse. The baby was transported to the hospital to be evaluated. The infant's mother was overwhelmed with emotion and extremely grateful, praising Officer Vincent and Officer Diaz for saving her baby's life. For their immediate and decisive actions that saved the life of this baby, Officer Matthew Vincent and Officer Michael Diaz are being awarded the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal. Will Officer Kerry Wygant please come forward? On the night of January 2nd, 2014, Officer Kerry Wygant and his partner responded to a 911 call of a man who was shot in the chest. No other details were available. However, the scene sounded chaotic over the phone. When the officers arrived, they found the panicked victim bleeding heavily, walking around the house with several other family members who spoke limited English and were not able to tell officers what had occurred. Not knowing what had happened, the officers first had to determine that there were no additional victims and/or suspects in the house before rendering aid. Seconds later, the home was deemed safe, and the officers immediately attended to the victim, who had a large gunshot wound to the chest. Officer Wygant retrieved a large amount of gauze from his medical aid supplies and stuffed it into a hole in the victim's chest to help stop the bleeding. As he applied life-saving direct pressure to the wound, the victim, who was very pale and scared, kept asking if he was going to make it. Officer Wygant continually comforted and reassured the victim that yes, he would indeed make it. Although the paramedics and fire personnel who arrived on scene were convinced that the victim would not make it, as he was showing all the signs of dying, he did in fact survive. Attending medical personnel at the hospital stated that without Officer Wygant's immediate and decisive actions, the victim most certainly would have died. For his quick and creative actions and for his confident reassurance that saved a human life, Officer Kerry Wygant has earned the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal.
Kerry Wygant, so we got the name. Is it better? Wygant, all right.
Will Officer Gerald Cepeda and Eduardo Avalos please come forward? In the morning hours of September 11, 2014, Officer Gerald Cepeda and Officer Eduardo Avalos responded to an emergency call of a man down, not breathing. The officers arrived to find a citizen rendering CPR to the victim. Officer Cepeda checked the victim and found him blue and lifeless. Both Officers Cepeda and Avalos immediately took over first aid from the citizen. Officer Cepeda gave the victim chest compressions, and Officer Avalos gave him breathing assistance until paramedics arrived and transported the victim to the hospital. The emergency room physician praised both the citizen and the officers for providing immediate assistance in this life and death situation. He further stated that the officers' actions in performing appropriate life-saving techniques saved the life of this man. For their rapid intervention and actions to save the life of another, Officer Gerald Cepeda and Officer Eduardo Avalos are awarded the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal. Will Officer Jesus Cerda please come forward? Officer Jeffrey Lee, who will also receive a medal for this incident, is away and unable to attend today's ceremony. In the early morning hours of July 10, 2014, Fresno Police Dispatch received a call regarding a victim of an overdose with the reporting party attempting CPR. Officer Jesus Cerda and Jeffrey Lee responded code 3 and arrived within 4 minutes. Upon arrival, the officers found the victim inside a bedroom, unconscious, turning blue, and appearing lifeless. His two female roommates were attempting to perform CPR on him. Officer Serta took over rescue breathing, and Officer Lee took over chest compressions. They checked the victim for vital signs, and the victim was not breathing and did not have a pulse. The officers continued the CPR for 2 cycles, and at the beginning of the 3rd cycle, the victim opened his eyes, arched his back, and immediately sat up, appearing startled and surprised. The victim was dazed and confused, but was breathing on his own. Emergency medical personnel arrived and were informed as to what had occurred. They credit the actions of Officers Serta and Lee as being responsible for bringing the victim back to life, and that they are the reason he is alive today. For their immediate and decisive actions to prevent loss of life to this victim, we proudly present the life-saving medal to Officer Jesus Serta and Jeffrey Lee. Will Officer Roland Rendon please come forward? On July 19, 2014, Officer Roland Rendon was working traffic enforcement on his motorcycle when he heard a call over the radio of a small child choking. Officer Rendon was close to the location and was able to arrive within 1 minute. He arrived to find the 2 parents in front of their home helplessly holding their 1-year-old baby in their arms, waiting for someone to arrive. Desperately needing help, they thrust their little son into Officer Rendon's arms. Officer Rendon did a quick assessment of the child and put the unconscious baby over his knee. He felt around inside the child's mouth with his finger. Not feeling anything, he looked inside the mouth and saw an object. Officer Rendon put him over his knee, face down, and started giving the child back blows. After 5 back blows, the baby still was not responding, so Officer Rendon did another finger sweep and saw the object was closer to coming out. He performed more back blows, and a square piece of hard candy fell onto the sidewalk. The baby started crying and was again able to breathe on his own. The child was checked by American Ambulance and released to the elated and grateful parents who could not praise Officer Rendon enough for saving the life of their son. If not for Officer Rendon's quick and skillful actions, this child may have easily died or suffered severe brain damage due to a lack of oxygen. For his immediate and effective actions that saved the life of this baby, we are pleased to award the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal to Officer Roland Rendon. Will Officer Frank Borrego please come forward? On the afternoon of July 30th, 2014, Officer Frank Borrego responded to a call reporting a man in a canal saying that he could not swim. Officer Borrego was the first emergency responder to arrive and immediately saw the victim, who had entered the canal to save his dog, was in deep, cold, swift-moving water. The man was holding on to a submerged shopping cart, which was the only thing keeping him from being swept downstream and dragged under a roadway overpass. Officer Borrego called for the fire department to respond and remained with the victim as assisting officers began to arrive to block traffic and coordinate with rescue personnel. Seeing that the victim was struggling to maintain his hold on the shopping cart, Officer Borrego took the sling from his patrol rifle and attached it to a spare sling to make it longer. He then tied the end into a loop and threw it to the victim. He instructed the victim to fasten the loop end around himself as Officer Borrego held on to the other end of the sling. The victim, who was weak from the cold rushing water, was able to release his grip on the shopping cart as Officer Borrego held the victim in place in the canal, keeping the victim from being swept downstream. Fresno fire personnel responded a short time later and with their equipment were able to pull the victim from the water. The fire captain on scene praised Officer Borrego for his quick thinking and resourcefulness. The fire captain went on to say the victim was up to his upper chest in water, and he was too weak and exhausted to have ever been able to pull himself out of the water. Without the sling rope improvised by Officer Borrego and him holding the victim's position, it is likely the victim would have continued down the canal in the rushing water and drowned. For his quick thinking, ingenuity, and life-saving actions, we are proud to award the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal to Officer Frank Borrego. Will Officer Brian Tweet please come forward? On the morning of August 18, 2014, Officer Brian Tweet was monitoring traffic on his police motorcycle in the area of Cedar and Grant. A passing motorist contacted him and advised him that it appeared that someone was having a heart attack just north of his location. Officer Tweet responded to the area of Cedar and Highway 180, where there were two vehicles parked in the middle of Cedar Avenue. As he approached, Officer Tweet observed two citizens pulling the victim from his vehicle, and one was beginning to perform CPR by giving chest compressions. Officer Tweet immediately checked the victim's vitals and found that he did not have a pulse and was not breathing. The victim was in fact turning blue from a lack of oxygen as Officer Tweet and the citizen began to administer two-man CPR together. They continued CPR for approximately 5 minutes before being relieved by arriving paramedics. Their efforts were effective and successful as the victim was taken for treatment at the hospital, underwent surgery, and ultimately made a full and healthy recovery. For his immediate actions and intervention to save a life of another, we proudly present Officer Brian Tweet with the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal. Will Officers Jacob DeLone and Sean Cowart please come forward? At nearly 3 a.m. the morning of September 22, 2014, the Fresno Police Department received several calls of an injury traffic collision on Kings Canyon near Willow. Officers Jacob DeLone and Sean Cowart responded to the accident scene and arrived within a couple of minutes of the first 911 call. They were the first emergency responders on scene. Upon arrival, the officers found a horrific single-vehicle collision into a tree. The driver and sole occupant was pinned in the vehicle and was unconscious. Smoke coming from the engine compartment quickly turned to flames and began to pour into the passenger compartment. The vehicle was so badly mangled that the officers first had to dislodge the victim's head from between the doorpost and the seat. With great difficulty, the officers were able to cut the seat belt, but when they tried to get the unconscious victim out of the vehicle, her legs were so pinned and crushed by the dash and engine compartment that she could not be freed. Officer Cowart quickly got a fire extinguisher and began to push the flames away from the victim. Officer DeLone put his arms around the victim and pulled her body as far away from the flames and smoke as humanly possible. The fuel kept the flames from ever being extinguished, and citizens supplied Officer Cowart with 4 additional extinguishers along with T-shirts to put over both the officers' faces against the heat and smoke. Both officers continued to battle the flames and smoke for over 5 minutes until the fire department arrived and took over the life-saving efforts. Officers DeLone and Cowart put the life of this victim before theirs, braving the heat and smoke, afraid the fire would get out of control and burn the victim alive. Once the victim was extricated from the vehicle, she was transported to the hospital where she underwent emergency surgery for numerous injuries. It is certain that without the valiant actions of these officers, the victim would have perished in her vehicle. For their immediate, effective, and selfless actions that saved the life of a fellow human being, we are pleased to award the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal to Officer Jacob DeLone and Officer Sean Cowart. Will Officer Sammy Ashworth please come forward? And Officer Stephen Craig, who is also involved in this incident, is out of town and unable to be here to receive his medal. On the evening of October 5th, 2014, Officer Stephen Craig and Sammy Ashworth were dispatched on a 911 call regarding a husband who had received a text from his wife with a photograph of her in a pool of blood. Officers arrived at the same time as the husband, and they entered the house to find a shocking scene with significant blood spatter on the walls, floor, and counter. The wife was in a tub full of blood. Officer Craig performed a sternum rub to determine if the victim had life, to which the victim faintly responded. The officers realized that before they could render aid to the victim, they had to remove the glass doors from the tub enclosure in order to remove her from the tub. The victim's wrists were slashed and spurting blood, so the officers applied pressure to her wrists even as they lifted her from the tub and placed her on the bed. They continued to use towels for bandages and applied direct pressure to her wrists until paramedics arrived, at which time they assumed care of the victim and transported her to the hospital. The doctor who treated her confirmed that the officers' actions were certainly what allowed the victim the opportunity to survive and have another chance at life. For the actions of these officers that saved the life of this woman, we are proud to award the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal to Officer Sammy Ashworth and Officer Stephen Craig. Will Officer Rudy Montoya please come forward? In the early evening on Christmas Eve 2014, police dispatch received a call regarding a 68-year-old mother who had fainted and was not breathing. When Officer Montoya arrived and located the victim, she was unresponsive and showed no signs of life. Her grandson was trying to give her CPR while receiving instructions over the phone from what sounded like the communication center. Officer Montoya conducted an initial assessment and found that the victim did not have a pulse, was not breathing, and the area around her mouth was already beginning to turn blue. Officer Montoya immediately began performing CPR and continued his actions until Fresno Fire arrived and relieved him. Emergency medical personnel arrived and were able to obtain a faint pulse and breath, which enabled them to transport the mother to the hospital, where she was later stabilized by doctors. The first arriving paramedic confirmed that when they arrived, the victim was in full cardiac arrest. She stated that without Officer Montoya's immediate and effective life-saving actions, the mother would have succumbed to her medical condition, and that he absolutely provided the mother with the opportunity to survive. Not only did Officer Montoya's actions serve to help save the life of this woman, but he helped a loving family from the heartbreak and tragedy of losing their mother on Christmas Eve night. For his immediate, effective, and skillful actions that saved the life of this victim, Officer Rudy Montoya is proudly being awarded the Fresno Police Department's Life-Saving Medal. Will retired officer Rick Ventura please come forward? On the afternoon of January 8, 2014, officers Rick Ventura and his partner were dispatched to a central Fresno market regarding a shooting victim behind the business. Upon arrival, the officers found the victim, and Officer Ventura observed the victim to be suffering from a very serious and life-threatening gunshot wound to his right chest area. The victim had a large hole just under his right armpit, which appeared to be from a close contact wound caused by a shotgun. The scene was chaotic, and his partner maintained the safety and security of the scene, and Officer Ventura as he attended to the victim. The victim was in extreme pain, had difficulty breathing, and was bleeding profusely, needing immediate medical care to save his life. Officer Ventura placed gloves on his hands and also placed extra latex gloves in the large hole, then pressed his hand over the wound to apply direct pressure. Officer Ventura calmed the victim as he repeatedly asked if he was going to die. Calming the victim prevented him from going into shock, and Officer Ventura's hand prevented the victim from bleeding further. Medical personnel credit Officer Ventura's quick thinking and actions in saving the victim's life and affording him the chance for treatment and recovery in the hospital. For Officer Rick Ventura's immediate, effective actions, for his calming reassurance, and for his quick thinking to use what he had available to save the life of this man, the Fresno Police Department is pleased to award retired Officer Rick Ventura with the Fresno Police Department's life-saving medal.
Thank you very much, Rick, for reading those in the manner in which you did. I am so blessed. So very blessed to have the privilege to lead these men and women. I mean that with all my heart. When you hear the stories and the fact that they put their life on the line to save other people, in some cases, a suicidal victim who did not want to have their life saved. Infants and babies, and I get choked up because I have 3 grandsons and 2 of them being infants. And we know how near and dear they are to our hearts. And to know that a police officer happens to be at the right place at the right time is a miracle of God. And we're grateful and thankful for all of you guys for what you've done today. For those officers that are removing drunk drivers from our streets, we know the impact that that has on a family when they lose a loved one as a result of a drunk driver. For those officers that have taken so many firearms off of our streets to keep our citizens safe, we will never know the lives that you have saved. And we are so grateful and thankful for all of you and your efforts. And as I said earlier, we're thankful to the family. You know, my number one goal as a police chief is to never lose a police officer in the line of duty on my watch. And we've been very fortunate. We've had officers shot. We've had officers that are in critical condition in the hospital as a result of stabbings and being in collisions, but we haven't lost one. And it is our commitment in the Fresno Police Department to do everything that we can for your loved one, to train them, to equip them, and to make sure that they have the adequate staffing out there in the field that when they pick up the radio and call for assistance, they can have an officer next to them. So we are thankful. We are blessed as a community. And it's not by chance that when citizens pull up next to us, as I said earlier, and give us a thumbs up, it isn't because they didn't earn it. It's because all of you earn it each and every day. So I want everybody to stand up, give them a round of applause. One person I didn't introduce, Fresno Police Officer Association President Jackie Parks. Thank you for being here today, Jackie. And also for Lindsay Hughes, who puts this ceremony on. Community Service Officer Lindsay Hughes, thank you very, very much. That will conclude our ceremony, 1 hour. And stick around for the officers that are here today. We're going to assemble for some photos. For the rest of us, there are refreshments out front in the foyer that is provided by the Fresno Police and Neighborhood Watch Association. Thank you. Stay safe. Stay cool today. God bless you.